Good evening and welcome to Crossroads. Right now is a time of crisis. We have a migration crisis, an environmental crisis, a public health crisis. There's a race crisis, a mental health crisis, and many others that are too long to list. And it seems that behind each and every one of these, well, there's evidence of some deeper agenda and also proposals for new laws and restrictions that seem a bit disconnected and kind of far out, actually. We apparently need to stop using straws and stop driving cars in order to change the weather. We need to stop being white to fix racism. We all need to keep getting experimental shots that don't stop infection or transmission to stop infection and transmission. But there's also another crisis, and like all the others, the narrative on the cause and the proposals on how to fix it appear to be utterly deceptive and disconnected from reality. This is the housing crisis. Now, apparently there just aren't enough homes to go around. This is despite the fact that the population is declining and there used to be enough homes. But let's ignore that key piece of evidence just a little bit, because we're going to discuss the official narrative and the proposed solution. The narrative on what's causing the housing crisis is zoning laws. According to the corporate media, the problem is the suburbs. It's people who have their own homes on their own plots of land. They say the problem is that American dream, that white picket fence with a tree and a tire swing and a golden retriever running in the yard. They say the solution is to end single-family housing. We all need to stack up in apartments and high-rises. Only then can the housing crisis really be solved. Like, here's a recent piece from CNN on it. They say the problem goes back to 1910 when cities launched new policies that would, quote, lay the roots for the severe housing shortage today, single-family zoning laws. The article goes on to explain that zoning laws have a basic concept. It makes it so that factories cannot be built in one part of town, or have to be built in one part of town. In another part of town, you can have apartment buildings, and in another area, you can build single-family homes. It alleges that these zoning laws protected the value of homes because why? Well, they stopped the construction of apartments and factories in some areas, and those higher values, well, that means higher prices. And this often means more wealth, better safety, and better schools. And so those homes just might be racist. CNN writes that critics say zoning laws ended up being exclusionary, reinforced racial and class segregation, and shut the door to many Americans on home ownership. But they have an apparent solution. Get rid of those zoning laws and clear the way for multi-family homes. Why have a selfish house with your own yard when you can have a whole apartment building on that same piece of land? Maybe we can even build whole cities like this where everything is reachable, let's say in like 15 minutes maybe. Look, in all seriousness, this is the agenda. It's an agenda laid out by the United Nations, funny enough. Goal 11 of the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals is to, quote, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like the 15-minute cities being pushed by the World Economic Forum, partnered with Agenda 2030, by the way. It's described, in fact, on the organization's website, saying a new model for developing mixed-use walkable communities known as the 15-minute city is gathering momentum in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, here's a promo video from the C40 organization, a global network of mayors of the world's leading cities that are united in action to confront the climate crisis.
Before the recent lockdowns around the world, we led hectic lives with long commutes and not enough time to spend with our families and friends. Traffic polluted our air and smog blanketed our skylines.
What if it could be different? What if we could create a new normal where we reclaim our time, our health and well-being, and our communities?
This is the idea behind the 15-minute city.
What a terrible thing. We have to drive cars, we have to commute. It makes pollution, it makes smog, and just takes us away from our families. So what's the solution? Well, stack everything together in a mega structure. We can all live there as a big, happy community. Your job will be there. Your grocery stores and services will be there. Why, you may just never need to leave. Kind of like a giant prison, only you want to be there, right? So what that look like in practice? Well, it would look a lot like the mega city they're building in Saudi Arabia. They call it the Line. Watch.
For too long, humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The Line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers. And we are designing it to provide a healthier, more sustainable quality of life.
That's not science fiction, by the way. That initiative is under NEOM. It's a new urban area planned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and they're actually already starting to build it. Of course, banning single-family homes in the US wouldn't immediately look like the Line. It would look a lot more like apartments and high-rises, but there's actually been a movement for this in the US for a long time now. Back to that agenda, though, to eliminating single-family homes and the alleged problems with zoning laws. Are zoning laws really driving up prices, and are they actually pushing people out of the housing market? Well, look, I would actually agree that there's a problem with government intervention on where homes can or can't be built. But the issue is not just single-family zoning. Look, we have an economy based on supply and demand. What does that mean? That includes the housing market. If there was more demand for houses, normally that would create more jobs. People would build those houses. People would look to meet that demand. If there is really a shortage, what happens? Home builders would be jumping on it to build more homes. So the question isn't on the lack of homes, but instead, what's stopping builders from building more houses? Well, personally, I'd say it's government regulations being a big cause of it. They limit new construction through zoning laws, notably, and red tape, and also other programs as well. It makes it expensive to build. It's not that accessible. And since it's expensive to build, what happens? Well, that price goes down the line to the end product and the house costs more. And even more so, since the restrictions are putting a squeeze on the supply, that's causing other problems. But back to the question I raised at the beginning. We used to have enough houses to go around. We're told the population is declining. Construction has continued, and so by all means, we should have an overabundance of homes, not a lack of housing. So where'd all those houses go? Well, if you turn to other parts of the world, interestingly, where political agendas are different from here, they're not blaming single-family zoning laws, that on the lack of houses. They're blaming mass migration. Again, it's supply and demand. If supply is being constricted by government policy, then the average citizen needs to struggle over who gets to have their share of that limited supply. Less supply, more demand, and what happens? Well, prices go up. In Canada, for example, which is actually more woke than the US, this is the main discussion on high cost of homes and on their housing crisis. As a Vancouver Sun opinion piece states, they say, although some minimize it, immigration and housing prices are profoundly connected. Immigration policy is a form of housing policy. So what's the solution? Well, the editorial board of the Globe and Mail in Canada said this last year. They said, immigration is rising, so will housing prices, unless we start building a lot more homes. What a concept. If you bring in more people, you need to build more houses for them to live in. Otherwise, they compete over who gets to have the available real estate. And what happens? Well, prices go through the roof. If you import 5 million people, you need millions of additional new homes. Amazing. So let's ask the next big question here. If in Canada and many other countries notably, they say the cause of rising house prices is increased demand and that mass migration is a key cause of that, why don't we just build more homes? They don't technically need to be apartments or high-rises. It's not the single-family homes that are the problem. They could be any homes. We could build whole new towns, whole new communities. In fact, it's a home developer's dream come true. And couldn't we use the jobs? They say we need more jobs. So why are we talking about changing laws instead to eliminate single-family homes instead of talking about building more homes? Well, look, aside from the odd political agendas on the United Nations and Green New Deal and those 15-minute cities, there's actually a lot of financial interest. Back in 2021, it was reported in the United States that investment firms were trying to snatch up all the single-family homes in the U.S. Among those were big-name investment firms like BlackRock and others. Slate reported this. Corporate investors snapped up 15% of U.S. homes for sale in the first quarter of this year. And that was just in 2021. Wall Street Journal reported around the same time that yield-chasing investors are snapping up single-family homes, competing with ordinary Americans and driving up prices. Wait a minute. Look, we were told in 2021 that investment firms, including some of the big-name woke ones behind the ESG agenda, were the cause of the housing prices going up. They told us that in 2021. They were mainly snatching up single-family homes. And now we're told that housing prices are too high? And we're not being told that narrative. Now we're being told the problem is instead, these single-family zoning laws, not the monopoly of the investment firms. Well, look, here's my take on what's happening. Massive investment firms and big banks have been allowed to buy up an asset. In this case, it's single-family homes. They're limiting the supply. Mass migration is driving up the demand on that limited supply. What does that mean? Prices go up. And because prices go up, the value of the assets controlled by those big firms, it increases. They're investment firms. They need to increase the value of their assets. If we were to build more single-family homes, what would happen? It would have the same effect as inflation. You print more money, then the value of the money in circulation goes down. In this case, you build more houses and housing prices would go down. And for the big investment firms and the assets that they value, the single-family homes, those prices, they would go down. So the proposed solution from the powers that be is not to build more single-family homes. It isn't to break the monopoly of the investment firms. The proposal is instead to institutionalize that shortage and notably align themselves with those globalist agendas. They get to keep the single-family homes. The new construction is multi-family homes. Supply is created, in other words, with a different product. Demand for the original asset gets maintained. And anybody who wants their own house with their own yard and that good old American dream needs to pay a manufactured premium. And what a deceptive trick to play on the well-being of Americans. That's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and as always, stay informed and stay free.